Big up, big up. It's a stick up, stick up. And we're shooting inward quick if they hiccup. As Biggie once said, welcome to today's episode of The Variety Show. We are here from the niche cache in honor of and for Aotearoa sporting excellence. And we are here to deliver a platter of Aotearoa sporting excellence and bits and bobs, predominantly from the weekend. We love Aotearoa sport, we love Aotearoa, and we love having a little kōrero about Aotearoa sports as well. Prior to this, we did a special podcast for our Patreon whānau. So if you are a member of the Patreon whānau, head on over to the Patreon page, and there is a fresh, deep weekend sporting chat for you to enjoy. A lot of Blackcaps as well. So that's there for our Patreon whānau. And if you do enjoy the niche cache and you like what we're doing, head on over to patreon.com/EL niche cache. And that's where you can support us straight up the guts. You get a good karma boost. You get some positive juju your way. You get extra podcasts. And it's just a wholesome vibe because you're putting some food in our bellies and you're keeping a bit of gas in our tank. We appreciate it greatly. And we try and deliver as much extra content as we can for the Patreon whānau. We also deliver a Monday and Friday email banger. Sign up at thenichecache.substack.com, whack in your email address, and you get all the niche cache content straight to your email inbox on a Monday and Friday. And we got extra yarns there as well in the written format. So if you are a bit fuck social media, sign up there and you just get all the niche cache stuff straight to your email, and you can check out the niche cache. The niche-cache.com is the website ting, where we are always covering Aotearoa sport to the best of our abilities, because all you can do in this life wildcard is your best. That's pretty mindful and that is pretty inspirational, but you're the geezer delivering mindfulness to start our show. But first, you seem to have really, I don't know, I forgot what the word is here. Your background images aren't easy to understand. Today, you've just got some fog. So do you want to just quickly explain why you've chosen fog as your background image and parlay that into some mindfulness to start the show?
Yeah, the fog is, you might not be able to pick him out, but somewhere over my shoulder is Mr. Sarpreet Singh, and he's about, 10 or 15 minutes away from scoring a nice goal. It's from his cup game on the weekend. I did share the video of it. It's a nice little sort of cross came in. He sort of flicked it behind his standing leg with nice little, clever little dinky finish there to get his team back into it. In that game, I shared the video. Then we went and recorded a podcast. This was Thursday, it must have been. Then when we were done the podcast, our Twitter account had been locked and suspended because the copyright holders had a bit of a whinge. I had to scroll with my eyes closed, basically, but scroll through the terms and conditions of Twitter's user manual or whatever it is in order to get back up and running again. So I will have that video up in Flying Kiwis, but I can't link people to the Twitter because the tweet now just says that this material has been withheld. But yes, that was Sarpreet Singh scoring a goal in the fog, and this was a screenshot I took before the fog. Before the goal, during the fog when it was at its worst, just to highlight how bad that was. So if you can't see anything, that was the point. It's a nice, great background as well that makes me stand out and means my cup doesn't disappear as much, or it does a little bit. But the mindfulness, what did you say just before? All you can do in life is try your best. Was that it?
Yeah, and there was also a bit of Biggie mindfulness to start the show.
There was.
You were just talking about fog there, and I thought about the Snoop Dogg, creeping through the fog, something about the smog. It's the number one N-word from the hood, doggy dog. But you're the mindfulness guru, so I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Do some mindfulness and let's start the show.
Well, the point about all you can do in this life, whatever, is a nice little thing, because I'm going to quote something from this bad boy here, which is disappearing in the thing, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. All you can do after your life is, but that's not actually what this quote refers to. Mr. W.Y. Evans Wentz, the fellow who brought this book to the Western canon, I think is probably, unless it's a newer translation, I've got no idea, but the quote goes, "Our past thinking has determined our present status, and our present thinking will determine our future status. For man is what man thinks."
Any explanation? Any thoughts?
I mean, just you are what you think is kind of the summary thing at the end there, and what you think is determined by what you thought in the past, and what you thought in the past determines what you think now, which determines what you become when your thoughts of whatever in the future, etc., etc.
It's kind of like you're kind of future proofing yourself by staying in the moment, by having good positive
that's a good way to put
in the moment. You're future proofing what is to come. Whereas I think the opposite of that, and what a lot of people find themselves in, is shitting the bed right now with their thoughts, and then creating further problems based upon those thoughts in the future, which then results in, continue that toilet metaphor.
Yeah, well, the algorithms will do that to you, won't they? They'll push you further and further to extremes when you think one thing, and then you suddenly get bombarded with that same thing more and more and more and more to make it seem like something is happening more than it actually is. And then when this is the case, like you see this quite obviously in how, first of all, how American politics worked over the last sort of 4 years, but then now that's filtered out into every other country. But like, if you start thinking that the world is a mess, and then you continue to see content that tells you that the world is a mess, that's going to influence you continuing to think that the world is not just a mess, but worse. Like it's becoming more and more and more of a mess, as opposed to if you think joyful things and give people the benefit of the doubt, and try, as you say, like stay in the present moment and not linger on things that bring you down, then that will also lead to being a happier person in the future as well as in the present. These things, I don't know if it's like I learned a new word the other day listening to a podcast called neuroplasticity, where they talk about the way that your sort of brain rewires itself through experiences and thoughts and things like that. Because I'm sure that's an oversimplification or whatever it is, and not exactly don't exactly have the degrees or the PhDs to back that up. But like, it makes sense to me that if you continually think or expose yourself to more negative ideas, you will become a more negative person, and things beyond that, like you'll start to see the negative and things that have nothing to do with what you were initially thinking about, because you're sort of rewiring your brain through habit to think that way. You know what I mean? And so I think that all adds up nicely to what Mr. was. I assume it's a Mr. It might not be, but W.Y. Evans Wentz, Tibetan Book of the Dead.
I swear at some point, because what just happened usually happens, and I always have some level of trust that you're going to come back around and tie it into like what is actually happening. Because I
can't always do that in the actual segments of the show, but the mindfulness things I'm a little bit better at.
Because you mentioned USA, there's a bit of politics, and it's like, oh, it's not go there. Let's keep it mindfulness. Let's keep it buzzy and trippy and spiritual, and then you find your way back, just like a wanderer.
Fog.
Yeah, Starpreet singing in the fog, or just a wanderer gone walkabouts. You always find your way back home. Sports, Aotearoa sports, bulkaka. We start our show with the chili bin of long lost hot takes of the radio sport variety. I'm kind of moving it more into the chili bin take segment as opposed to the 1332 radio sport hot take segment. But right now it's a package of both, where we both just deliver a take. What do you got to start the show and get the show on track 10 minutes in?
Well, how about this? The banger of a take to start off with, that is that the Blackcaps of Aotearoa, New Zealand, are Indian cricket's bogey team. And this isn't even really a take. This is like a statistically backed up fact, and I'm going to do that. We don't necessarily realize this. I think on like in our country, we don't necessarily understand just how much of a bogey team we are to India, probably because we tend to be pretty committed to the old like underdog status type thing, and we like to see ourselves as just the plucky battlers. But that's not really the case with these Blackcaps anymore, because they consistently do really well at these tournaments. I think they've made 4 semi-finals in ODI World Cups in a row, including 2 finals, including one that they didn't even lose. They just didn't win. Made the last World T20 semi-finals, on course to make these ones, won the Test Championship, etc. Like, they do well at all these tournaments. They even won one, but like, maybe we don't seem to have seen the same pattern. I think when you win games, you got to win a lot of games to do well. So maybe that's something that gets buried. When you lose, you often have the one game that cost you. And I think definitely, if it's not known on our perspective, it's definitely known in India's perspective. They're very much well aware that they tend to lose to New Zealand at these things. Just beat them by 8 wickets in the 2020 World Cup this morning. Must-win game for both sides, and New Zealand dominated with bat. New Zealand dominated with ball. Earlier in the year, of course, they were the team that we beat by 8 wickets in the Test Championship final. As I mentioned, we beat them in the ODI World Cup too, knocked them out in the semis. Fact is, India hasn't actually beaten New Zealand in an ICC tournament since 2003, and it's only happened twice ever. 1975 World Cup, beat them by 4 wickets. 1979, beat them again. 1987, they beat us by 16 runs. But in 1992, we beat them by 4 wickets. 99, beat them by 5 wickets. 2000 Champions Trophy, the only other tournament that the Blackcaps have ever won, beat India by 4 wickets in the final. Mention the more recent ones. India won by 7 wickets in 2003. That was a gun Indian team as well. That's like Tendulkar, Ganguly, Dravid days. But since then, beat them at the World T20s in 2007, beat them on their own turf in the World T20s in 2016, where I think we bowled them out for like 79 in the second innings. And then, yeah, the 3 ones most recently, one in each format that I mentioned, like the Blackcaps, just whatever they, among the many strings to their bow, one of them is that we always seem to beat India at major tournaments. We're their bogey team. Should be known well. It should be a lot more well known in New Zealand than it is, but I guarantee you it's well known in India. I guarantee they're going to be like sitting scrolling through feeds, Indian cricket fans right now, being like, again, we lost to New Zealand again. Why does this always happen?
And we usually defeat India with Indians in the team as well. Maybe not, deep in the history, but definitely more recently we have returned the favor. My take to start the show is the Otago Sparks are officially the bright future Sparks. They have a young core down in Otago, and they were very impressive over the weekend. We had the first round of Halliburton Johnston Shield cricket, which is women's one-day cricket in Aotearoa, and the Otago Sparks defeated the Central Hinds in both games. The Otago Sparks do have a veteran core, Susie Bates and Katie Martin. Katie Martin hit a century, and I think she was not out in both games. Let me just double check that one. Yep, 2 innings and 2 not out innings. So shout out to Katie Martin. Also a shout out to Kate Ibrahim, the probably the best batswoman not in the White Ferns. She has averaged 40 plus in the last 5 seasons. So 2016, 48, 17, 52, 2018, 86. Last season, she averaged 60. So those are the veterans, and they were like very helpful in helping Otago win those 2 games, especially Katie Martin. But there were some key contributions from 5 players under the age of 25. Bella James is 22 years old. She hit 53. Polly Inglis is 25 years old. She hit 68. We had Emma Black, 20-year-old. She took 5 wickets and 3 wickets to finish with 8 wickets from the weekend. 20-year-old Eden Carson, she took 3 wickets. And 18-year-old Molly Lowe, she took 3 wickets as well. So, yes, there are some great veterans with the Otago Sparks. But I am most interested in, and I'm telling Kiwi cricket fans to be very interested in, the bright future Sparks. Really interesting core of young players down in Otago. Last season in the HBJ Shield, they lost all 10 games. To start this season, they've won 2 games. So shout out to the bright future Sparks, going to be tracking their progress all summer long. We've already dropped a whole bunch of stats here, Wildcard, but we're going to inject some vitamin statistics just for a bit of health and well-being purposes.
Well, how about some bright future Wellington Phoenix as well, which they fly out this afternoon. Actually, today is departure day for not just the Wellington Phoenix and not just both of the Wellington Phoenix squads as well. First time ever, men's and women's teams both going over there. But also the Breakers are hitchhiking their way across on the Phoenix's chartered flight as well. So that's cool. Everyone's just pitching in together. But it's the inaugural women's team that I've got the stats for here, and it's all about youth for the Phoenix. There are 13 Kiwis on their books. Only 4 are older than the age of 20 right now, and the oldest is goalkeeper Lily Olfeld, who is 26. It's the oldest player in the squad right now. There's still like, I think 6 Australians that'll be signed up at some point to add to this, so might find some veterans there, but we'll see. Among those 13 players, which include 2 scholarship players as well, by the way, which was some nice finagling by the Phoenix to get an extra couple Kiwis in there. There are 3 members of the 2018 Under-17 World Cup bronze medalists, Grace Wisniewski, Kelly Brown and Mackenzie Barry. They're all there. And 6 out of 13, like 6 out of the 13, almost half of them, are actually from the Under-17s wave that came after them. So 6 out of 13 would have been part of the subsequent Under-17 World Cup, but it was cancelled for COVID. So they didn't actually get to do that, but they would have been. Those are Ava Pritchard, Kate Taylor, Zoe McMeekin, Mona Walker, and the 2 scholarship players, Alyssa Wynnum and Charlotte Lancaster. So that gives you a bit of an idea as to how young they are. But even the 2 Australians that they've signed so far, Kush LaRue and Isabel Gomez, they're also both teenagers. So it's even more so. And Gomez, along with Olfeld, is actually one of only 2 players in the current squad so far who have prior A-League experience. Gomez played 5 games for Western Sydney last season. Olfeld played every game, 12 of them for Perth Glory. So yeah, as exciting as the whole process is, and just getting this new pathway for women's footballers, probably want to sign a couple Australian veterans with those last few roster spots because it's pretty green right now.
Need a Ryan Nelson, Stephen Taylor, and Andrew Durante.
And Andrew Durante would be perfect.
Yeah, one of those geezers. My vitamin statistic. Major takeaway from the Blackcaps start to the T20 World Cup, loss versus Pakistan, win versus India, is Daryl Mitchell opening the batting. Bit of a surprise selection for him to be opening, but it's doing well. It's been building to this point as well as being well right here and now, because Daryl Mitchell has been fantastic in different forms of T20 cricket. So if we go back to last summer's Super Smash, he was 4th in runs, average of 37, strike rate of 135. Then if we go to the T20 Blast in England, Daryl Mitchell wasn't talked about too much, but he averaged 26 for Middlesex with a strike rate of 144, which is really impressive. He did play some T20 internationals at the start of this year, and he's played a couple in the T20 World Cup. So in T20 international cricket this year, 2021, he is averaging 40 with a strike rate of 157. And to start this T20 World Cup, he has 76 runs at an average of 38 and a strike rate of 138. So in all 4 of those little categories, this World Cup, 2021 T20 Internationals, Super Smash, and T20 Blast, he has an average over 25 and a strike rate over 135. And that's really impressive for someone who probably wasn't a first 11 T20 international player to most people at the start of this World Cup. I kind of had him as a middle order batsman, might bowl a couple of overs. He's opened in both games, scored 76 runs at a strike rate of 138, and he has been the major takeaway, I reckon, from that Blackcaps start to the T20 World Cup. Let's take a little deep dive here, Wildcard, into the Mangroves. where numerous jandals and socks and slides have been lost to the slosh in the mangroves. What do you got?
Well, maybe we'll be able to find some of those jandals when the Phoenix's charter plane flies over the top of it. If you get the old, get like Tim Payne on the binoculars or something, see if you can spot something. But of course, I've already mentioned the Phoenix, some stuff about the Phoenix, but the Breakers are flying out with them. And last week, the Breakers finalized their roster. They had one spot left, a local spot on their 11-man roster, which is 12, including the next guy who doesn't count towards the tally of players. And that last spot has gone to, drumroll, Isaac Davidson, who was already a contracted development player. So it's cool for ID. It's great. He's a quality shooter. He's good technical player, versatile, played a number of positions. He can defend well against a number of positions. Also, it's cool because his sister is Penina Davidson, who had a real good tournament for the Tall Ferns at the Asia Cup recently. So bit of a family affair there in the Kiwi basketball. But from a team perspective, one of the reasons that the Breakers sucked last season was bad recruiting. Their star import just did not deliver, and it was until about halfway through the season that they were able to, adequately replace them. And when the top of the roster isn't delivering and you have a couple injuries to other starters, and suddenly your depth is called upon, and the depth players they signed weren't good enough on a couple of accounts and didn't get played the whole lot, and it all got a bit sketchy. And sort of stems from bad recruiting. The players you're signing aren't able to do the roles you hope they would be able to do. That's a problem. And the depth is already a little bit sketchy this season too, because they've got two next star guys. Basically, they've got Ousmane Dieng, who's a bonus player, doesn't count against the roster, but they also have Hugo Besson, his fellow Frenchman, who they've signed with one of their import spots. So he's like a 20-year-old French shooter prospect hoping to get into the NBA, which is cool. But he's not going to be of the level of someone who maybe has already played NBA, who they might have been able to get with an import spot otherwise. We know that next star stuff isn't really a basketball decision, pure and simple. Part of it is you are getting a good prospect who's going to hopefully bring some, buzz to the team on the court. But most of it is like marketing. It's getting the league talked about. It's incentivized by the league. They love it. Matty Walsh loves it. Like, whatever, but that's just the fact of the matter is it's not a purely win now basketball move. We saw that with RJ Hampton, who's gone on to be a pretty handy NBA player already to this point in his career, but he wasn't helping the Breakers win games when he was there. And hopefully that'll be different with Dieng and Besson. But if it's not, then it's going to expose depth once again. One thing that Coach Shamir said was that he liked he specifically kind of acknowledged that it wasn't necessarily a fully basketball decision, that it is also a marketing move, et cetera, But one thing he did really like about the Next Stars is that thing about them not counting towards the roster. There's only one who's an actual next star, is Dieng. The fact he doesn't count against the roster means basically the Breakers get an extra body, and they were short on bodies last season, so that's cool. However, they then go and kind of undo that by signing a guy who they already had signed up as a development player. So I think that's a little bit strange. Just sign another bloke and Davidson can still play. He can still be the DP. He's got a contract option for next season. Sign him then. I don't know, but like what's Hiram Harris doing right now? He would have been a perfect addition, but it's an odd one, especially because Davidson also last season, he only played 17 total minutes as a DP. He appeared in 11 games, but only played 17 minutes. And I noticed the press release made a big deal about the 11 appearances, didn't mention the minutes, but whatsoever. But so it goes. Hopefully since then, he's just won over the coach. He's going to play heaps of minutes and he's going to be really good for the team and they're going to win a lot of games. Hopefully that's the case. Just, a little bit of an odd bit of Breakers logic is the only thing, but then again, it wouldn't be a new Breakers season if there wasn't some odd logic going into it.
At least Isaac Davidson's a New Zealander.
Yep, well, that's one of the best parts, yeah.
So we have
and a good player too. I like him. He deserves it, but it's just like having one fewer player. It's a bit weird.
Any extra New Zealander in that Breakers team is a positive. Let's just wrap it up there. Deep in my mangroves, I've got a worst case scenario for Dan Hooker. He fought Islam Makhachev Sunday morning, and I was a bit scared. I was going to be having my breakfast, watching Dan Hooker with a bloke on top of him, getting punched in the face, elbows, like all sorts of Dagestani ground and pound. That was a bit of, I was scared of that. I was hopeful that Dan Hooker could win this fight, showcase his striking and defensive wrestling and grappling. Neither of those things happened. But Dan Hooker did get taken down within 30 seconds, and basically Islam Makhachev took him down, just kind of worked through dominant positions, and then yanked his arm behind his back in what is apparently known as a Kimura submission. But to the MMA pleb, let's just view it as yanking your arm behind your back, which really fucking hurts, and it hurt too much for Dan Hooker. And he tapped, and Islam Makhachev won that fight. Within the first round, Dan Hooker didn't really do too much before getting taken down. And I kind of, in previewing the fight, I mentioned the word inevitable a few times. But I was hopeful. And I was hopeful that, I was kind of taking the piss out of the inevitability of Islam Makhachev, because that's how a lot of people in the MMA world view him. It's kind of inevitable that he will compete for a title bout, and the way his fights play out, it's inevitable he will take you down and smash you on the mat. So I was kind of poking fun at that, like, Dan Hooker's here to stop the inevitable. The inevitable happened, and Dan Hooker lost. And it kind of, like, to sum up where Dan Hooker's at right now, he's like a top 10 fighter for sure. He's probably top 6. But when he came up against Dustin Poirier in that 5-round war, he lost that fight. When he came up against Michael Chandler, he was knocked out in the first round. Then he dropped down a few levels to fight Nasrat Haqparast a few weeks ago, won that fight. Here he comes up against a fighter on the rise, and Islam Makhachev loses that fight. So it's like, Dan Hooker's really good in the division, but he's kind of fallen just short against the best fighters in the lightweight division, which is a bit of a bummer. Is what it is. And it's just kind of worst case scenario for Dan Hooker. So interesting to see what happens next for him. But for like Kiwi UFC, City Kickboxing matters, next up we got Brad Riddell is the big one. I think he's fighting early December, so we'll stay tuned to see what happens there. Question time wildcard. I've got 2 questions. You've got 1. So I'll start here. And I want to know, what's your biggest football thing right now? Obviously, try and be Aotearoa related. Like, I don't really give a shit about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or fucking whatever else is happening in the world of football. I want to know, Aotearoa football, what is the biggest thing that you're finding joy, funk, pleasure, disdain, whatever it is? What's the biggest Kiwi football thing right now?
Right now, it might, in a weird way, be international football, because this has just not been something that's been on the cards for either the All Whites or the Footy Ferns for quite a while. But they've both had a couple games in recent times. Both got at least one more game coming up, and before the end of the year. The All Whites have already booked themselves in to play against the Gambia in the next international window, and there's been talk that the Footy Ferns will play against Korea. I think Yeka Kumplova kind of let that one slip in a thing. It's not confirmed yet, though. But hopefully that gets over the line. Hopefully they might even add a second game as well. Who knows? But that's a little on again, off again thing, though. Like, if you get squads, then you get the games, and you get to write about them at each of those points. It's not necessarily a continuing onwards thing, though. So in that light, maybe it's the Phoenix leading into the new season, but like, there's a lot of squaddy stuff I can write about now and am writing about. But I think probably the main focus right now at this moment would be some of the leagues that are coming to an end right now, because there's leagues that run in sort of the English format of, start in like September, August, finish in like April. And so the end of the calendar year is like the middle of their season. But there's also leagues that run year on year. America is one that does it like that. A lot of the Scandinavian places do it like that. Well, those are 2 places where a lot of Kiwi footballers happen to be. So, for example, CJ Bott wasn't able to play in this game because she was just coming back from playing a whole lot of Football Ferns duty. But She was there with the team as they won as Vålerenga won the Norwegian Cup for the second year running. So, that end of season joy is a trophy is always high up there, even though their season hasn't been as good this year as it was last year when they did the double. Joe Bell's on, and also ex-Kiwi, temporary ex-Kiwi or ex-temporary Kiwi, I think probably the way to put it. Gianni Stensness at the same club as well. At Viking, they're scrapping to hopefully maybe even finish top 2. If they'd won this morning, they'd have gone second equal, behind only on goal difference. But alas, was not to be. They've still got about 5 games to go to get themselves as high up that ladder as possible. There's the case of Joel Stevens and Francis de Vries at Värnamo in Sweden in the second tier. They just got promoted last year. Now they're almost certain to be promoted again into the Swedish top flight. So that'd be pretty amazing. Hopefully they're still there after they get promoted as well next year, hopefully. Examples like that. The MLS and the MLS, I think, has 1 more week of games before the playoffs. Bill Tuiloma's Portland Timbers should make it. Michael Boxall's Minnesota United are kind of on the fringes, but they had a good win on the weekend, which puts them probably more likely than not to make it. And then the NWSL had just had their last round of regular season games, and Aotearoa's North Carolina Courage, who have been leading the way in this competition for so long, just scraped in thanks to other results on the final day. Only drew their last game when a win would have put them through, but Houston lost, so they got away with it, and they will be in the playoffs. So I think some of those, like when you get to the end of the season, especially when you're following individual players, and there's a lot about like, Joe Bell's team might have won, but he didn't get an assist. There's not as much to write about as, say, like a game they lose and he gets an assist. I've got a cool highlight clip to chuck in there. But it's always important to remember like the context of what players are doing. Is they're trying to win games. They're trying to win trophies. And when you get to the end of the season, when that stuff is in focus and those trophies start to be handed out, it definitely gets to be a bit of a priority as well.
Just quickly, who is the winningest Kiwi footballer, like kind of in the last few years?
I would say, unless you want to count like Greg Draper winning the Welsh Premier League, something like 8 years out of 10 or something, that'd be up there. But if you also want to like balance the standard of play as well, because the Welsh Premier League isn't the highest standard compared to other players around the place, it would be Aotearoa. I got to imagine, who plays in one of the top women's leagues on the planet and has won it like 4 of the last 6 or 7 years or something like that, and runners up at least one other time, like that, and also winning a bunch of personal accolades as well, as Defender of the Year in like 2018 or whatever. I'd say Aotearoa, the most decorated.
Your question.
My question is not about who's the most decorated Plunket Shield player. It's about who's the most underrated Plunket Shield player, because we talk a lot about like the young guys coming up pushing for Blackcaps spot. We talk a lot about Blackcaps playing in the Plunket Shield, dropping in, scoring good runs, stuff like that. The things that sort of catch the headline attention. But I'm asking, who's the most undercover performer in Plunket Shield?
But you were meant to ask like someone specifically, or are you trying to get me to answer with that person?
I'm asking you who we talked about it beforehand, so I know who you're going to say. But
your initial question was, is Greg Hay the most underrated, under-celebrated, low-key, underground hero?
Yeah, that bit was in brackets. I wasn't going to, but so sure, yeah.
I just did a deep dive
by any chance.
Yeah, I just did a mini deep dive on Greg Hay, but I don't know if he is actually. That was based on your nudge in the Greg Hay direction. But Greg Hay is fantastic. I will say that. Back-to-back centuries to start the Plunket Shield, and just a dude who averages 42 in first-class cricket, and he's hit 2 centuries already this season, and then in the last 4 seasons of Plunket Shield cricket, he has hit at least 3 half centuries. So one summer he had 2017, he had 3 centuries, 5 half centuries. 2018, 2 centuries, 3 half centuries. 2019, 5 half centuries. 2020, 3 half centuries. And considering the amount of games they play, it's basically a half century per game is what Greg Hayes doing for the Central District Stags. So, because I think I mentioned him last time when you were asking about like who would get called up for the Blackcaps, like that type of thing. And I was like, pick a bloke to do a job, one game, Greg Hay, that type of character. Since then, he's hit another century. And he is, I don't think anyone knows who he is. Other than
he's never played for the Blackcaps, eh?
Definitely not. And he's also he's got a List A average of 40 as well, which is one-day cricket, but he's only played 32 games. Bro, he's even got a T20 strike rate of 123. So he's far from just a red ball cricketer, but he is just a red ball cricketer because doesn't really do much else for Central District Stags. Probably the best job in New Zealand sport, Greg Hay. Just spends most of these lads are part-time cricketers. A lot of Kiwi sports people, they are part-time athletes. Greg Hayes probably got a, pretty nice job in whatever field he specializes in. Summertime comes around, bit of cricket where I average 42 and I'm kind of guaranteed to hit a half century or multiple half centuries every summer. So it's not like a strenuous, like I think everyone wants to be a professional athlete or a part-time athlete. And in this context, people want to be cricketers, but they don't necessarily want to go through that patch where you can't score any runs. Greg Hay doesn't worry about that. Greg Hay just keeps scoring runs every summer. And so it's like guaranteed he's going to have a good summer. He's going to be outdoors, getting lots of sun, traveling around New Zealand, averaging 40, averaging 60, averaging 50. It's just the life and times of Greg Hay for the Central District Stags.
Is there someone else you'd say is more underrated, though?
As a Plunket Shield cricketer?
Yeah.
I'm partial to Ish Sodhi, who's got a pretty fantastic Plunket Shield record, underrated with the red ball.
Yep, hasn't been in the test team for several years, so that counts.
Glenn Phillips, underrated with the red ball. These are just names that come to the top of my head. Not necessarily the, you're probably skewing towards like a Fraser Sheep, Canterbury seamer, who's pretty fantastic. Those type of characters.
There we go.
I want to use I was a bit scared because I was thinking like, okay, my question to you is, how would you grade Steven Adams' start to the season? 1 to 10, 5-star, ABC grades. We're not American, so we don't grow up with the ABC grades, but at uni, they do give you the ABC grades. So we'll go with the New Zealand University ABC grading system. How would you grade Steven Adams' start to the NBA season, first year with the Memphis Grizzlies? What's he doing? It's like a first semester assignment.
Right. Yeah. Okay. The first week of the season, I'd have said like just a straight up solid like A, if not even maybe pushing towards an A+. It was absolutely brilliant in the first 3 games. What we've had since then is I think 4 games where he has not been anywhere near as influential. 1 game he had foul trouble, which is an anomaly because he actually didn't even commit a foul, didn't even commit a single personal foul in the first 2 games of the season. And it's normally 1 or 2 in the others, but he had 1 game, might have been Portland, I think, where he had some foul trouble and it wasn't good. That just meant he just didn't get the minutes he otherwise would have. And there was a game against Golden State Warriors where they sat him for the whole 4th quarter and overtime, which is obviously not what we want to see, but they did come back and win that game, so that was nice. So in light of that, probably got to bump it down to like a B+. Something like that. So I think we've seen sort of like the best case scenario in week 1 and then sort of like the worst case scenario in week 2. But what's promising about the week 2 is that, he wasn't playing big minutes. It wasn't as much of a, just wasn't having the influence he was having in the first week and wasn't playing nearly as much in 4th quarters, especially, but still churning out like, 6 points, 7 rebounds kind of performances. And if that's like, your baseline of performance, I think he's still in a pretty solid place. So yeah, I'd lean towards like I think a B plus at this point. But that's in light of the contextual stuff of we've kind of seen what it looks like in a game where he's not going to be effective or just not going to be used for like the Warriors thing. It wasn't because he was playing badly or anything. He actually had a really good third quarter in that game. And I was quite surprised they didn't bring him back for the rebounding, if nothing else. But obviously it's the Golden State Warriors fourth quarter. You're playing against like Draymond Green at center and you're trying to play small and have shooters and versatile defenders on the court. So that's it was more a matchup thing than anything. But, we saw what that game looks like. We've seen what games where he plays 35 minutes and gets like, 15 points and 14 rebounds look like. So most likely what we get is somewhere in between of those things in terms of his like season averages, and somewhere in between those two is a pretty solid NBA starter there.
B plus, definitely chuffed with a B plus for a uni assignment. So
he would have taken that every time. Yeah,
that would have been reason to hit any number of vices in celebration. Music,
not all at once
though. Big jam from the 20th boys. This one came out a couple of months ago, but it goes hard. 20th boys, they are from South Auckland. They mention Manurewa, shout out Rewa, in their song Passive Mode. So if you look up 20th boys, Passive Mode, they deliver a slammer. And it's a bit drilly, but they're also very skillful with their raps and their poems, which goes pretty hard. Like, do love a bit of the street hip hop and especially local hip hop. So shout out to 20th boys, and a bit of a throwback. Just spent a couple hours this morning listening to the Action Bronson album with Static Selector, Well Done, which was one of his first projects, but I actually missed it over all these years. And I was just listening to a Static Selector interview with Smoke Dizza, and amazing interview. So I just shout out to that. But Static Selector referenced this project with Action Bronson. Beautiful piece of music. What do you got for musical jam?
Well, the new War on Drugs album is out, which is I haven't listened to it beyond the single so far, but there's a couple of the singles, especially the title track, where I'm just like, this is outstanding. War on Drugs is definitely in that sort of like it's trying to be like a bit of a classic rock, kind of heartland rock throwback. Like there's definite like Springsteen vibes, Dire Straits vibes, that kind of thing. But it just, so I could see people like treating that band as a little bit of a guilty pleasure, but it's not guilty when they do it that well. And that, from what I've heard of the new album so far, it's excellent. I didn't think the last one was, I mean, the Lost in a Dream, I think the album from like 2013 or 14, I think is an absolute like stone cold classic. I didn't think the last album was on the same level. I think this, outside of one or two songs, I think this new one seems like it's going to be nice big return to form jam. Marissa Nadler's got a new album, which is also I haven't listened to any of these yet outside the singles, but I'm excited to. Marissa Nadler's sort of like, I was going to say like gothic folk. It's just more like dark folky kind of singer-songwriter type thing. It's not, maybe not quite as gothic, because gothic sounds more like someone like, Chelsea Wolfe or something. But yeah, Marissa Nadler's new one will be good. I thought her last album was outstanding as well. And then Billy Strings. Billy Strings is like, this album actually came out, I think a couple months ago, and I missed it because he's technically like a bluegrass player, which is like, the rural version of rural music, like banjos and stuff. But he's also like, he's real good at that. Like his last album was pretty cool in that line, but it's not necessarily the type of music I am like plugged into, so I missed it when it came out. But Billy Strings in like the last year or two has also started playing a lot more like electric guitar, and he's somehow latched onto like the vestiges of like the Grateful Dead circuit of what's still around. He's played with Bill Kreutzmann a lot, and he's just like partially recreating himself as like this jam band dude, and he's real good. He's amazing at it, actually. And so this new album, I'm quite excited to see if that side of him comes into his recorded side as well as just his live side. So yeah, keen to give that one a bit of a whirl as well.
Give it a whirl, give life a whirl, give being a good person a whirl, give your own mana a whirl, and just give positive energy a whirl. Holy fuck, could we use some of that? Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Māori ora. Ciao.